Jake Morrison stared at the bottom of his empty glass. The cheap alcohol had tasted terrible, but it was all he could afford. 7 credits. That was everything he had left in the entire galaxy. His fingers drummed on the sticky table as he watched. Aliens, humans, and other creatures drink and laugh around him. The cantina on orbital station Kepler 7 was not a nice place. The lights were too dim, the air smelled like engine fuel, and most of the customers looked like they would steal your ship if you looked away too long. But it was cheap, and cheap was all Jake could manage right now. 3 days ago, his cargo ship had been taken by the station authorities. A deal had gone wrong on the planet below. The buyer had claimed the medical supplies were fake, even though Jake knew they were real. But without proof and without money for a lawyer, his ship was gone. Now he was stuck on this floating piece of metal with nowhere to go and no way to get there. Jake looked around the cantina again. At one table, a group of blue-skinned aliens were playing cards with what looked like small bones. At another, 2 humans were arguing about shipping routes through dangerous space. Near the bar, a woman with metal parts replacing half her face was buying drinks for a table full of rough-looking mercenaries. The door to the cantina opened with a loud hiss. The noise in the room got quieter as everyone turned to look. 3 figures walked in, and Jake could tell right away they did not belong in a place like this. The first was an elf woman who moved like she owned the entire station. Her long silver hair was perfect. Her clothes probably cost more than most people made in a year, and her green eyes looked at everything around her like it was all beneath her notice. Behind her walked 2 more elf women, clearly her servants or assistants. Jake had seen elves before, but never up close. They lived for hundreds of years and controlled some of the richest parts of the galaxy. This one looked like she had never seen a poor day in her very long life. The elf woman walked straight to the bar and ordered something expensive. The bartender, a large alien with 4 arms, quickly served her while trying not to look directly at her face. Jake watched as she turned around and looked over the cantina like she was studying insects. "Humans," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Her voice was smooth and cold. Such a young race, such simple minds. Jake felt his face get hot. Several other humans in the cantina looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. Elves had power, money, and connections. Smart people did not argue with them. "I heard one of them earlier," the elf continued, talking to her companions but speaking loud enough for the whole room, complaining that humans are not respected in galactic society, as if respect is something you can demand rather than earn over centuries. One of her assistants, a younger elf with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable. "Lady Lyralay, perhaps we should—" "No, Arya," the elf called Lyralay said. "I find it amusing. Humans think they deserve the same treatment as races that have been exploring space since before their planet even had cities." Jake's hand tightened around his empty glass. He knew he should stay quiet. He had no money, no ship, and no friends on this station. Starting trouble with an elf noble was the last thing he needed. But the words came out anyway. "Maybe humans do not have centuries of experience," Jake said, standing up from his table. "But we get things done. We figure out solutions when everyone else says something is impossible." The cantina went completely silent. Even the card players stopped their game to watch. Lyralay turned toward Jake with a smile that was not friendly at all. "Oh?" she said, walking closer to his table. "And what impossible things have you accomplished lately, human?" Jake looked down at his worn clothes and empty pockets. "I am having a bad few days," he admitted. "But that does not change what humans can do when we put our minds to it." Lyralay laughed, a sound like expensive bells. "How wonderfully optimistic. Tell me, human, what is your name?" "Jake Morrison." "Well, Jake Morrison, I have a proposition for you." She reached into her elegant bag and pulled out a small device. "I love making bets, especially ones that prove my points about inferior species." The device projected a holographic contract that glowed blue in the dim light. Legal text scrolled past too fast for Jake to read properly. "Here is my offer," Lyralay said. "You have 30 standard days to find and legally claim something that has never been owned by any sentient being anywhere in the galaxy. Not just this system, not just this sector, but anywhere in known space." Jake stared at her. "That is impossible. The galaxy is billions of years old. Everything has been found and claimed by someone. Exactly my point, Lirelei said. But if, somehow, you manage to do this impossible thing, I will give you my personal fleet of 12 ships and trading rights to 3 entire star systems. You would become one of the richest humans alive. And if I fail, you become my personal servant for 50 years. You will serve my household, run my errands, and do whatever I command until you are too old to be useful. Jake looked at the contract floating between them. 50 years of slavery against riches beyond imagination. It was completely insane. No one could find something that had never been owned by anyone. Even if such a thing existed, how would he? Find it with no ship and no money? But what was his alternative? Stay on this station until his 7 credits ran out? Try to find work as a manual laborer? He was already at the bottom. At least this way, he had a chance, even if it was impossible. I will need witnesses, Jake said. Lyrelei's smile got wider. Of course. She gestured to the cantina. Everyone here can witness, and I will register this contract with Galactic Law Enforcement to make it completely legal. Arya, the younger elf, stepped forward. Lady Lyrelei, perhaps this is not— Silence, Lyrelei said sharply. The human has made his choice. She looked back at Jake. Do you accept these terms, Jake Morrison? Jake thought about his empty ship berth, his 7 credits, and his complete lack of options. He thought about every human who had ever been looked down on by older, richer races. He thought about proving that humans could do the impossible. I accept, he said. The contract flashed bright blue as both their handprints were recorded. Around the cantina, aliens and humans whispered to each other about the crazy human who had just signed his life away. Lyrelei put the device back in her bag. 30 days, Jake Morrison. Find me something that has never been owned, or prepare for a very long life of servitude. She turned and walked toward the door, her assistants following. Arya glanced back at Jake with what might have been sympathy before disappearing into the corridor. Jake sat back down at his table and looked at his empty glass. 29 days and 23 hours left, 7 credits to his name, and somehow he had to do something that had never been done before in the entire history of the galaxy. The other people in the cantina slowly went back to their drinks and conversations. A few looked at him like he was already dead. Others shook their heads like they had just watched someone jump off a cliff. Jake Morrison had just made the biggest bet of his life. Everyone thought it was impossible. Maybe they were right. But humans had a habit of doing impossible things. Jake woke up on a bench in the station's public area. His neck hurt and his back was stiff, but sleeping there was free. He had spent his first night trying to think of a plan, but every idea seemed more impossible than the last. 28 days left. He walked to the nearest public terminal and used one of his precious credits to access the Galactic Information Network. For the next 3 hours, he searched through databases, legal documents, and historical records. Everything he found made his situation look worse. The galaxy was old. Really old. Billions of years of exploration, conquest, trade, and discovery. Every planet, every asteroid, every piece of space dust seemed to belong to someone. Even things that looked worthless were claimed by governments, corporations, or private collectors. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe he should find Lyrelei and surrender now. 50 years of slavery was better than dying alone on this station when his credits ran out. Excuse me? A voice said behind him. Are you the human who made the bet with Lady Lyrelei? Jake turned around to see a woman in a white coat. She had short brown hair and intelligent eyes behind small glasses. Her name tag said, Dr. Nina Voss, Xenobiology Research. That would be me, Jake said. Jake Morrison, professional idiot. Nina smiled. I was in the cantina last night. I heard the whole thing. She sat down in the chair next to him. I have been thinking about your problem. You and everyone else on the station. Most people think I should prepare for a very long life of serving drinks to an elf. Maybe, Nina said. But I work with galactic law every day. I have to understand ownership rights for my research. The legal definition of owned is more complicated than most people think. Jake leaned forward. What do you mean? For something to be legally owned under galactic law, it has to meet 3 requirements, Nina explained. First, it has to be claimed by a sentient being. Second, that claim has to be registered with at least one recognized government. Third, the object has to exist in a stable form for at least 1 standard day. Okay, Jake said slowly. How does that help me? Think about it. What if you could find something that was just created? Something so new that nobody has had time to claim it yet? Jake thought about this. Like what? New planets take millions of years to form. Even asteroids are billions of years old. Not necessarily, Nina said. She pulled out a small tablet and showed him a star chart. There are places in the galaxy where new matter is being created right now, stellar nurseries where stars are being born, nebulae, where cosmic forces are creating new elements. The problem is that these places are incredibly dangerous and very far away. Jake studied the chart. Red zones marked areas that were off-limits to civilian ships. Yellow zones required special permits and military escorts. Even the green zones looked like they were weeks of travel from any civilized system. This is interesting, Jake said, but I do not have a ship. I do not even have enough money for passage on a cargo hauler. That might not be as big a problem as you think, Nina said. Word about your bet is spreading fast. Some people think you are crazy, but others think you might actually have a chance. Humans have a reputation for doing impossible things. As if summoned by her words, a new voice spoke up behind them. Did someone say impossible things? They turned to see a woman, in a worn flight jacket and cargo pants. She was maybe 40 years old, with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and hands that were permanently stained with engine grease. Everything about her said, Spacer. Captain Lisa Brooks, the woman said, extending a hand to Jake. I run cargo between here and the outer systems. I heard about your little problem. Jake shook her hand. Let me guess. You want to tell me how stupid I am? Actually, no, Lisa said. I want to offer you a deal. I have been running the same boring cargo routes for 15 years. Medical supplies to colony worlds, manufactured goods back to the core systems. It pays the bills, but it is not exactly exciting. She sat down across from them. Your bet got me thinking. When was the last time I did something interesting? When was the last time any human did something that made the galaxy sit up and take notice? What are you suggesting? Jake asked. I loan you my ship, Lisa said. The Wanderer's Dream. She's not much to look at, but she is fast and reliable. In exchange, if you somehow win this bet, I get 50% of whatever you gain. Jake stared at her. You would risk your ship for a bet that everyone thinks is impossible? Why not? Lisa shrugged. I have been flying safe routes my whole career. Maybe it is time to take a real risk. Nina looked excited. With a ship, you could actually reach some of the areas where new matter might be forming. Captain Brooks, how far can your ship travel? Anywhere in the galaxy, given enough time and fuel, Lisa said. The Wanderer has an extended range drive system. We could reach the Genesis sector in about 2 weeks. The Genesis sector? Jake asked. Nina's eyes lit up. It is a region of space where new star systems are being born. Very dangerous, very unexplored, and definitely the kind of place where you might find matter that has never been claimed by anyone. Also the kind of place where you might die horribly, Lisa added cheerfully. Solar radiation, gravitational anomalies, cosmic storms, and probably some alien defense systems left over from the old wars. Jake thought about this. A few hours ago, he had been sleeping on a bench with no hope at all. Now he had a scientist willing to help him and a ship captain willing to risk everything on his crazy bet. There is one more thing, a new voice said. All 3 of them turned to see a figure approaching their table. The newcomer was clearly not entirely human. Her skin had a slight blue tint, and her eyes were larger than normal. Half of her face was covered with cybernetic implants that glowed softly in the station's lights. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who was part machine. I am Zara 9, she said in a voice that had electronic undertones. I represent certain trading interests in the outer systems. Jake had heard of the Nexus Collective. They were a group of enhanced beings who controlled much of the black market trade in illegal technology and information. What do you want? Jake asked carefully. I want to make a deal, Zara 9 said. The Nexus has been monitoring galactic communications. Your bet with Lady Lyra Lee has attracted attention in some very high places. She sat down at their table without being invited. There are beings in this galaxy who have grown tired of the old powers, the elves with their ancient arrogance, the corporate empires with their endless greed. Even some of the military hierarchies are looking for change. What does that have to do with me? Jake asked. You represent something new, Zara 9 explained. A human willing to risk everything on pure determination. If you succeed, you prove that the old ways are not the only ways. If you fail, nothing changes. She placed a small data chip on the table. This contains information that might help you. Navigation data for the Genesis sector, sensor readings of unusual energy patterns, even some defensive codes that might get you past automated security systems. What do you want in return? Lisa asked suspiciously. Nothing now, Zara 9 said. If Jake succeeds, the Nexus would like to discuss future business arrangements. If he fails, we never met. Jake picked up the data chip. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own energy. Why help me? Because chaos creates opportunity, Zara 9 said with a smile that was not entirely human. And because humans have a talent for creating chaos, she stood up from the table. You have 27 days left, Jake Morrison. The Genesis sector is 2 weeks away. That gives you 2 weeks to find something that has never existed before and get back here to claim your prize. After she left, the three of them sat in silence for a moment. Well, Lisa finally said, this just got a lot more interesting. Nina was already studying the data chip with a portable scanner. The information on here is incredible, detailed, maps of stellar formation zones, energy readings that suggest new matter creation, even theoretical calculations about harvesting techniques. Jake felt something he had not experienced since this whole thing started. Hope. Not much, but enough to keep going. So, he said, when do we leave? Lisa grinned. As soon as I can fuel up the ship and file a flight plan. Are you ready to do something impossible, Jake Morrison? Jake thought about Lyra Lie's arrogant smile, about every human who had ever been dismissed as inferior, about his 7 credits and his complete lack of alternatives. Let me ask you something, he said. What is the most impossible thing you have ever done? Kept an aging cargo ship running for 15 years on a mechanic's salary, Lisa said. Convinced the galactic scientific community to fund research into alien biology, Nina added. Jake nodded. Then we should be fine. Humans specialize in impossible things. 27 days to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy. 27 days to turn 7 credits into the wealth of worlds. The countdown had begun. The Wanderer's dream was not the prettiest ship Jake had ever seen. The hull was patched in dozen places, the engines made strange noises, and the interior smelled like recycled air and machine oil. But when Lisa fired up the main drive, the ship moved like it was eager to fly. She may not look like much, Lisa said from the pilot's seat, but she has never let me down. They had been traveling for 12 days now, jumping from system to system toward the Genesis sector. Jake spent most of his time in the small science lab that Nina had set up, studying the data from Zara 9 and learning about stellar formation. Look at this, Nina said, pointing to readings on her screen. These energy signatures are unlike anything in the databases. Matter is being created at the atomic level in some of these stellar nurseries. Jake leaned over her shoulder to look at the data. Numbers and charts filled the screen, most of which he did not understand. But Nina's excitement was obvious. The process is called stellar nucleosynthesis, she explained. When a new star forms, the incredible pressure and heat create new elements that have never existed before. For a brief time, before the star stabilizes, these elements exist in a pure state. How brief? Jake asked. Sometimes only hours, maybe days if we are lucky. Jake felt his stomach tighten. They were still 2 days away from the Genesis sector. If they arrived and the formation process was over, this whole trip would be for nothing. Captain Brooks, he called toward the bridge. Can we go any faster? Already pushing the engines as hard as I dare, Lisa called back. Any faster and we risk burning out the drive core. Then we would be stuck floating in space with no way home. Jake nodded and went back to studying the data. 16 days left on his bet. 2 days to reach the Genesis sector. Maybe a few hours to find and claim something that had never been owned before. Then 2 weeks to get back to orbital station Kepler 7. The timing was going to be very close. On the 13th day, their long-range sensors picked up something unusual. "We have company," Lisa announced over the ship's communication system. "3 ships on an intercept course. They are not broadcasting identification signals." Jake and Nina hurried to the bridge. Through the main view screen, they could see 3 sleek vessels approaching fast. They had the graceful curves and silver coloring that Jake recognized as elven design. "Lady Lyrelei," he said quietly. "How did she find us?" Nina asked. "Elves have connections everywhere," Lisa said, her hands dancing over the flight controls. "She probably has been tracking us since we left the station." The communication system crackled to life. A familiar, cold voice filled the bridge. "Jake Morrison," Lyrelei said. "How pleasant to see you again. I hope you are enjoying your little adventure." "Lady Lyrelei," Jake replied, activating the comm system. "Checking up on your future servant?" Something like that. "I wanted to make sure you understood the terms of our agreement. You must find something that has never been owned and bring it back within 30 days. You cannot simply steal something that already belongs to someone else." "I understand the terms," Jake said. "Good, because I would hate for there to be any confusion when you inevitably fail." One of the other elven ships moved closer to the Wanderer's Dream. Jake could see weapons systems powering up. "There is one more thing," Lyrelei continued. "I have been consulting with legal experts about our bet. They inform me that using a team to complete the task might be considered cheating. After all, the bet was with you personally, not with your human friends." Jake felt his heart sink. Without Lisa's ship and Nina's scientific knowledge, he had no chance at all. "However," Lyrelei said, and Jake could hear the smile in her voice, "I am feeling generous. I will allow your friends to assist you. Consider it my gift to a doomed effort." "How kind of you," Jake said through gritted teeth. "I thought so. Oh, and Jake, when you fail and become my servant, I have already planned your first assignment. You will be cleaning the waste disposal systems on my personal yacht for the first 5 years." The communication cut off, and the elven ships changed course, moving away from the Wanderer's Dream. "Pleasant woman," Lisa said dryly. "I can see why you made a bet with her." "She is just trying to get in your head," Nina said. "Do not let her." But Jake was already wondering if this whole thing was a mistake. Even if they found what they were looking for, Lyrelei clearly had resources and connections that he could not match. She could probably find ways to challenge his claim in court for years. The next day, they reached the edge of the Genesis sector. "Sweet stars above," Lisa whispered as she looked at the sensor readings. Through the view screen, they could see something that defied description. Space itself seemed to be alive with energy. Swirling clouds of gas and dust stretched for millions of kilometers, lit from within by the birth of new stars. Lightning-like discharges jumped between forming planets, and gravity waves created ripples in space-time that made the ship shake. "It is beautiful," Nina said in wonder. "It is also incredibly dangerous," Lisa added, studying her instruments. "Radiation levels are off the charts, gravitational anomalies everywhere, and these energy readings suggest there are automated defense systems throughout the region." "Defense systems?" Jake asked. "Left over from the old wars," Lisa explained. "Some ancient civilization built guardians to protect this area. Most are probably broken or dormant by now, but you never know." They spent the next several hours carefully navigating through the outer edge of the Genesis sector. Lisa's ship had good shields, but the radiation was still strong enough to be dangerous if they stayed too long. "There," Nina said suddenly, pointing at her scanner. "That stellar formation there. The readings are incredible. New matter is being created at an accelerated rate." Jake looked where she was pointing. A young star was surrounded by a disk of swirling material. As they watched, chunks of matter were condensing into what would eventually become planets. "How new is new?" Jake asked. Nina checked her instruments. "The star formation began less than 72 hours ago. Some of the planetary matter has been solid for less than a day." Jake felt his pulse quicken. Less than a day meant it might qualify as never having been owned, but they still had to get close enough to harvest a sample. and the area around the forming star was filled with deadly radiation and gravitational forces. "Can we get closer?" he asked Lisa. "Maybe," she said, studying the navigation charts. "But it will not be easy. The gravity well is unstable, and those energy discharges could overload our shields." "There is something else," Nina said, looking worried. "I am picking up artificial structures in that system. They look like monitoring stations or automated platforms." "The defense systems?" Jake asked. "Could be. Or they might be scientific monitoring equipment left by whoever claims this sector." Jake thought about this. If someone had already put monitoring equipment here, they might have legal claim to anything in the area, but they had come too far to give up now. "Let us get closer," he decided. "We need to see what we are dealing with." Lisa carefully piloted the ship deeper into the Genesis sector. The radiation increased with every kilometer, and the ship's shields began to strain under the assault of cosmic forces. As they approached the forming star system, the artificial structures became clearer. They were definitely not human or elven in design. The platforms were covered in symbols and geometric patterns that looked ancient and alien. "I think these are scientific monitoring stations," Nina said after studying the readings. "They are collecting data about the star formation process, but they do not seem to be claiming ownership of anything." "How can you tell?" Jake asked. "No ownership beacons, no territorial markers. They are just watching and recording." Suddenly, one of the platforms began to move. It turned toward their ship and began transmitting something. "We are being scanned," Lisa announced. "Whatever that thing is, it knows we are here." The platform transmitted a series of complex signals. Nina worked frantically to decode them. "It is some kind of automated message," she said. "I think it is asking for identification and purpose." "What do we tell it?" Jake asked. Before anyone could answer, the communication system activated. But instead of the ancient alien language they expected, a voice spoke in perfect human English. "Human vessel Wanderer's Dream, you are entering a restricted scientific preservation zone. Please state your purpose and authorization." All three of them stared at the communication panel in surprise. "That sounded almost human," Lisa said. "Not almost," said a new voice over the comm system. "It was human. This is Commander Vera Blackstone of the Galactic Defense Force. You are in violation of Treaty 847 regarding access to stellar formation zones." Jake's heart sank. A military commander meant official authority. If they were violating galactic law, his bet was already lost. "Commander Blackstone," he said, activating the comm system. "This is Jake Morrison. We are here on a legal mission related to a registered galactic contract." There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, sounding curious. "Jake Morrison? Are you the human who made that impossible bet with the elf noble?" "That would be me," Jake said carefully. Another pause. "Well, this just got interesting. Prepare to be boarded, Mr. Morrison. I think we need to talk." 14 days left on his bet. They had found a place where new matter was being created. Commander Vera Blackstone was not what Jake had expected. She was tall and athletic, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her skin had a slight green tint that spoke of alien heritage, but her attitude was completely human. "So," she said, sitting across from Jake in the Wanderer's small meeting room, "you made a bet that everyone thinks is impossible, and now you are here trying to steal matter from a newborn planet." "Not steal," Jake said carefully. "Legally claim. There is a difference," Vera laughed. "I like you already, Morrison. Most people would be begging for mercy right about now." She looked at the legal documents that Nina had prepared. "Your paperwork actually looks legitimate. Filed properly with Galactic Commerce Authority, witnessed by multiple parties, registered with law enforcement." "Does that mean we can proceed?" Nina asked hopefully. "Not so fast," Vera said. "This stellar formation zone is protected under several galactic treaties. No unauthorized mining, no interference with natural processes, no removal of materials, without proper permits." Jake felt his hopes crashing down. "So we cannot take anything?" "I did not say that," Vera replied with a slight smile. "I said you cannot take anything without proper permits." She pulled out a small device and began typing on it. "Lucky for you, I have the authority to issue emergency scientific collection permits for small samples." Lisa leaned forward. "What is the catch?" "No catch," Vera said. But I want to make something clear. I am not helping you because I like your chances. I am helping you because the galaxy needs to see what humans can do when we put our minds to something impossible. She handed Jake an official permit displayed on the device. This allows you to collect up to 1 kilogram of material for scientific purposes. The sample must be properly documented and cannot interfere with the natural formation process. 1 kilogram? Jake asked. That is not very much. It does not matter how much you take, Nina said excitedly. As long as it meets the legal requirements for never having been owned, the size does not matter. Vera stood up. There is one more thing. The planet you want to sample is surrounded by gravitational anomalies and radiation that would kill you in minutes. Even with the best shielding, getting close enough to collect a sample is going to be incredibly dangerous. How dangerous? Lisa asked. The kind of dangerous where one mistake means everyone dies, Vera said bluntly. But I might be able to help with that, too. She led them to the bridge of her military ship, which had docked with the Wanderer's Dream. Her vessel was much larger and more advanced, with weapon systems and defensive equipment that civilian ships could never afford. I have been studying this stellar formation for 3 months, Vera explained, showing them detailed scans on her main screen. The gravitational forces follow a predictable pattern. Every 6 hours, there is a window of about 20 minutes when the forces stabilize enough for a small ship to get close to the forming planet. Jake studied the readings. Even during the stable periods, the radiation levels were enormous, and the gravitational stress would crush most ships. The Wanderer's Dream is tough, Lisa said, but I do not think she can handle those forces. Which is why you will be taking one of my ships, Vera said. A military scout vessel designed for operations in hostile environments. You would loan us a military ship? Jake asked in amazement. Like I said, the galaxy needs to see what humans can do. Vera's expression became serious. But understand this, if you get yourselves killed, I will deny this conversation ever happened. Officially, you stole the ship and I tried to stop you. Nina was already studying the technical specifications of the scout ship. This could work, she said. The radiation shielding is military grade, and the gravitational compensators are top of the line. When is the next window? Jake asked. Vera checked her instruments. 4 hours and 17 minutes. That gives us time to plan the mission and modify the scout ship for sample collection. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Vera's engineering team helped Nina design a collection system that could harvest planetary material without contaminating it. Lisa studied the scout ship's controls and flight characteristics. Jake tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Remember, Nina said as they made final preparations, we need material that has been solid for less than 24 hours. Any longer, and it might not qualify as never having been owned. How will we know? Jake asked. I have programmed the scanners to detect crystallization patterns. Newer material will have specific signatures that older material will not have. Vera joined them in the scout ship's small cockpit. I have been thinking about your bet, she said. Even if you succeed in collecting the sample, Lady Lyrelei will probably challenge your claim in court. Elves have very good lawyers. I know, Jake said, but we have to try. Actually, Vera said with a mysterious smile, you might have more support than you realize. Word about your bet has spread throughout the galactic communication networks. Some very important people are watching to see what happens. Important people? Let me put it this way. Not everyone in the galaxy is happy with the current power structure. Some of us would like to see a human succeed at something the old powers think is impossible. Jake did not have time to ask what she meant, because Lisa was already starting the scout ship's engines. Gravitational window opens in 30 seconds, she announced. Everyone strap in and pray to whatever gods you believe in. The next 20 minutes were the most terrifying of Jake's life. Lisa piloted the small ship through gravitational forces that twisted space itself. The radiation was so intense that even the military shielding barely protected them. Energy discharges from the forming star created lightning storms that could have destroyed their ship with a single hit. But somehow, Lisa's skill and the scout ship's advanced systems got them. Through there, Nina shouted over the noise of straining engines and overloaded systems. The forming planet, dead ahead! Through the view screen, Jake could see something incredible. A world in the process of being born. The surface was still molten in places, cooling and solidifying as they watched. Crystalline formations were growing at visible speeds as new matter condensed from the cosmic forces around the young star. "I am reading material that solidified less than 6 hours ago," Nina reported excitedly. "This is perfect." "Beginning. Collection sequence," Lisa said, activating the sample harvesting system that Vera's team had installed. A mechanical arm extended from the scout ship and carefully broke off a piece of crystallized planetary core. The material glowed with its own inner light and seemed to pulse with energy. "Sample collected," Nina announced. 200 grams of matter that has existed in solid form for exactly 5 hours and 37 minutes. "Got it," Lisa said, pulling the scout ship away from the planet. "Now let us get out of here before the gravitational window closes." The trip back to Vera's ship was just as dangerous as the approach, but Lisa's confidence was higher now. They had done the impossible part. Now they just had to get home. "Congratulations," Vera said as they docked with her vessel. "You now possess something that has never been owned by any sentient being in the galaxy." Jake looked at the small sample container that held their prize. It did not look like much, just a piece of glowing crystal about the size of his fist. But if Nina was right about the legal requirements, this little rock was worth more than most planets. "There is one more thing," Vera said. "I have been monitoring galactic communications while you were on your mission. Lady Lirelai has arrived in this system with a fleet of 12 ships." Jake's stomach dropped. "She is here?" "About 6 hours out and closing fast. She is claiming that you are violating the terms of your bet by operating in restricted space." "But you gave us permits," Nina protested. "I did," Vera agreed. "But she has legal representatives with her who will argue that my permits were issued improperly. They want to stop you from returning to claim your prize." Jake looked at his sample, then at his friends who had risked everything to help him. 12 days to get back to orbital station Kepler 7, an elf fleet trying to stop them, legal challenges that could tie them up in court for years. "Can your ship outrun hers?" he asked Vera. "For a while, but not all the way back to civilized space." Vera paused. "However, I might know someone who can help with that." She activated her communication system and sent out a coded signal. A few minutes later, a response came back. "Friends of yours are on the way," she said with a smile. "The Nexus Collective has several ships in this area. Seems they have a vested interest in seeing you succeed." Through the view screen, Jake could see new ships approaching. They had the sleek, modified designs of Nexus vessels, and they were moving fast. "Zara 9?" he asked. "Among others," Vera confirmed. "Like I said, you have more support than you realize." Jake looked at the sample container again. 12 days to get home, multiple fleets converging on their position, the most valuable piece of rock in the galaxy sitting in his hands. "Well," he said to Lisa and Nina, "this should be interesting." "Interesting is one word for it," Lisa replied, already plotting escape routes. "Insane might be more accurate." But Jake was starting to feel something he had not experienced in years: confidence. The race back to orbital station Kepler 7 was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. 3 different fleets chased them through space. Lady Lirelai's elven ships trying to stop them, Vera's military vessels providing escort, and Zara 9's Nexus Collective ships running interference. For 11 days, they jumped from system to system, always staying just ahead of the elven pursuit. Lisa pushed the Wanderer's dream beyond its limits, while Nina carefully monitored their precious sample to make sure it remained stable. 6 hours to Kepler 7, Lisa announced from the pilot's seat. "We are actually going to make it." Jake looked at the sample container. The crystallized planetary matter still glowed with its own light, proof that it was unlike anything else in the galaxy. In a few hours, he would either be rich beyond imagination or a slave for the next 50 years. "Incoming transmission," Nina called out. "It is from the station." The communication screen lit up to show the face of an official-looking alien Jake did not recognize. "Wanderer's Dream, this is Station Administrator Keller. You are requested to dock at Bay 17 immediately upon arrival. A formal hearing has been arranged to determine the validity of your claim." "A hearing?" Jake asked. "Lady Lirelai has filed legal challenges to your bet," the administrator explained. "She claims you violated the terms by using assistance, operating in restricted space, and collecting material that was already claimed by scientific monitoring stations. Jake felt his heart sink. Even if they made it back in time, Lyreley was going to drag this through the courts for years. However, the administrator continued, the hearing will be conducted under expedited procedures due to the high-profile nature of this case. A decision will be reached within hours of your arrival. The transmission ended, leaving them in silence. Well, Lisa said finally, at least we will know the answer quickly. They docked at Orbital Station Kepler 7 with exactly 4 hours and 23 minutes remaining on Jake's 30-day deadline. Word of their arrival had spread, and the docking bay was crowded with reporters, traders, and curious onlookers from dozens of different species. Jake carried the sample container carefully as they made their way through the crowd. Some people shouted encouragement, others called him crazy, and a few tried to get close enough to touch the container. The hearing was held in the station's main legal chamber, a large room with seats for several hundred spectators. Jake was amazed to see that it was completely full. Apparently, his bet had attracted more attention than he realized. Lady Lyreley sat at one table with 3 lawyers and a pile of legal documents. She looked confident and completely calm. Jake sat at another table with Nina and Lisa, feeling very much out of his depth. The judge was an ancient alien with multiple eyes and a voice that sounded like grinding metal. This hearing will determine whether the human Jake Morrison has fulfilled the terms of his contract with Lady Lyreley Moonwhisper. Lady Lyreley, present your objections. One of Lyreley's lawyers stood up. Your Honor, we have 3 primary objections. First, the defendant used significant assistance from other parties, which was not permitted under the original bet. Second, he collected his sample from a restricted area in violation of galactic treaties. Third, the material he claims was never owned was in fact under the monitoring and scientific control of existing research stations. Jake's stomach tightened. All 3 objections sounded reasonable. Mr. Morrison, the judge said, how do you respond? Jake stood up slowly. He had never been in a legal hearing before, and he could feel hundreds of eyes watching him. Your Honor, he began, the original bet never specified that I had to work alone. Lady Lyreley's exact words were that I had to find and legally claim something that had never been owned. She did not say how I had to do it. Objection noted, the judge said. What about the restricted area violation? Nina stood up beside Jake. Your Honor, we have proper permits issued by Commander Vera Blackstone of the Galactic Defense Force. All our activities were legally authorized. And the claim that your sample was already owned by research stations? This time it was Vera who spoke from the audience. Your Honor, the monitoring stations in the Genesis sector are for scientific observation only. They make no ownership claims to any material in the area. I can provide documentation to that effect. The judge examined the various documents and permits for what felt like hours. Jake watched Lyreley's confident expression slowly change to concern as it became clear that his legal position was stronger than anyone had expected. There is one final matter, the judge announced. The defendant must prove that his sample has never been owned by any sentient being. Lady Lyreley's representatives claim this is impossible to prove definitively. This was the moment Jake had been dreading. How could anyone prove a negative? How could he show that something had never been owned in the entire history of the galaxy? But Nina was ready. She stood up with a tablet full of scientific data. Your Honor, the sample collected by Mr. Morrison consists of crystallized planetary core material that achieved solid form exactly 7 days, 4 hours, and 16 minutes ago. This timing can be verified through isotopic analysis and crystallization patterns. She connected her tablet to the room's display system, showing detailed scientific readings. Under galactic law, material must exist in stable form for at least 24 hours before it can be legally claimed. Our sample achieved solid form only 7 days ago and was collected immediately after the 24-hour minimum. During those 7 days, it was located in an area with no permanent settlements, no active mining claims, and no ownership declarations. The judge studied the data carefully. This is highly technical evidence. Are there any experts present who can verify these findings? To Jake's surprise, several beings stood up in the audience. A renowned elf scientist, a respected alien physicist, even a representative from the Galactic Science Academy. Your Honor, the elf scientist said, I have reviewed Dr. Voss's analysis. Her methodology is sound and her conclusions are correct. This material has existed in solid form for exactly the time period claimed. One by one, the experts confirmed Nina's findings. Jake watched Lyralay's face grow paler with each testimony. Furthermore, the physicist added, the legal principle of never owned has been interpreted by galactic courts to mean never subject to a legal claim. Since this material was collected within days of its formation and no claims were filed during that period, it meets the legal standard. The judge spent another hour reviewing all the evidence, legal precedents, and expert testimony. Finally, he spoke. This court finds that Jake Morrison has fulfilled the terms of his contract with Lady Lyralay Moonwhisper. The material presented, as evidence, meets all legal requirements for never having been owned. The collection was performed legally with proper permits and documentation. The use of assistance was not prohibited by the original contract terms. Jake felt his knees go, weak with relief. Therefore, the judge continued, Lady Lyralay is ordered to transfer ownership of 12 starships and trading rights to 3-star systems to Jake Morrison, as specified in their contract. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Jake looked around in amazement as beings from dozens of species celebrated his victory. Even some of the elves in the audience were clapping. But the biggest surprise came when Jake approached Lyralay's table after the hearing. Congratulations, she said quietly. I underestimated humans. I will not make that mistake again. Lady Lyralay, Jake said, I want to make you an offer. She looked surprised. What kind of offer? I do not want your ships as a prize, Jake said. I want them as an investment. I am forming a new trading company, and I would like you to be a partner rather than an enemy. Lyralay stared at him. You would offer partnership to someone who tried to make you a slave? The galaxy is big. Enough for all of us, Jake said. Humans, elves, aliens. We are all stronger when we work together. Behind Lyralay, Arya Starweaver smiled. She had been quietly supporting Jake throughout the whole ordeal, and now she stepped forward. Lady Lyralay, Arya said. Perhaps it is. Time our people learned from human creativity rather than dismissing it. For the first time since Jake had met her, Lyralay looked uncertain. What are you proposing? The Genesis Trading Company, Jake said. Equal partnership between humans, elves, and any other species that wants to join. We use my legal claim to the new matter as seed funding, your ships and connections for operations, and everyone's expertise to build something new. Nina stepped forward. The scientific applications alone would be revolutionary. New matter with unique properties could advance technology by centuries? Lisa nodded. And with proper ships and legal backing, we could explore regions of space that nobody has ever seen. Even Zara 9 appeared at Jake's side. The Nexus Collective would be interested in such an arrangement, she said. New opportunities require new partnerships. Jake looked around at all the faces watching him, human, elf, and alien. A few weeks ago, he had been broke and alone. Now he was surrounded by beings who had helped him achieve the impossible. So, he said to Lyralay, extending his hand, are you interested in doing something that has never been done before? Lyralay looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and shook it. You know,